Hi everyone, welcome to Learning Impact. In today's lecture, we will discuss Karl Marx theory of exploitation and surplus value. So let's start. Okay, first is that what does it mean by exploitation? Whenever we study Karl Marx philosophy, we usually come across this term of exploitation. What does it mean? Exploitation means the theft of the economic power in all class-based society, including capitalism, through the working class being forced to sell their labor. Means that when we leave working class with no other option but to sell their labor, this is the exploitation in case of the economic terms. When there is a class-based society and the working class, which is considered one of the oppressed class in the capitalism, which is also known as the proletariat by the Marx, such class, when they have no other option but they have only to perform their labor and to sell it to the capitalist at the wages which is set by the capitalists as minimum as possible. So they sell their wages to the capitalists because they have no other option. They do not own nothing, because they have no ownership of things, like they do not own the means of production nor the factories. Also, they do not own the technology or other things. What they only possess is their own labor. So they have to perform that, and they have to agree to the terms which is set by the capitalists, that how much will they get paid for their labor. So it might be as minimum as possible. So in that way, we can say that it is the exploitation. This system is called exploitative, and this whole phenomena is called exploitation. Now, in case of the capitalism, it is something necessary. Exploitation is the necessary part of the capitalist economy, because as in case of the capitalist class, they have to exploit the labor class, the working class, because otherwise they will not be able to compete in a market economy, in a capitalist economy, and they will if they will not exploit the working class, what will happen? That they will themselves become part of the proletarian. They will just jump down from the capitalist class to a proletarian and will themselves become oppressed class. So what they have two options: either to exploit the working class and to derive more and more profit at the expense of their labor, either to become part of the proletarian class themselves. So which option will they choose? Of course, they will go for the option first. They will tend to exploit the worker as much as possible by giving them minimum wages as possible, by extracting more and more profit, and by selling the product of their labor at high cost as possible in a market economy, by determining their exchange values more and more high. So in that way, we can say that exploitation is something necessary. It is inherent exploitation in the capitalist economy. Means that the capitalist and the working class, they have no other option. The capitalist has no other option but to exploit the working class, and the working class has no other option but to agree to the terms of the capitalist class. And then capitalists take advantage of their power to set wages and working hours to extract the greatest amount of labor. The capitalist class mostly exploit the worker, but how they exploit it? And they set the wages as minimum as possible, and they set the working hours as much as possible, and then they try to extract the greatest amount of labor. Most of the time they try their best to set their wages as minimum as possible. Even sometimes it can be reduced to zero, and they set their working hours as, sometimes it can persist for days, and then to extract the greatest amount of labor so that they will have more product as most of people demand for, and then they will derive more profit by selling their product which formed by the worker. So they will then sell that product in a market economy and determine their exchange value. So the capitalists enrich themselves by extracting a surplus value from their labor. Capitalists mostly think that the surplus value is a kind of profit that must go in the pocket of the capitalist class, and it's something, a natural system. But according to Marx, it is something inherent exploitation in the capitalist class, in a capitalism itself, that the capitalists, they enrich themselves by extracting a surplus value. Surplus value is a difference between the value of the product, which was determined by the capitalist, and the pay which the worker gets as a compensation of the labor which they perform. The difference between the pay, the labor pay, and the value of the product, the difference of it is the surplus value, that how much profit has been derived. So the capitalists always try to give low pay as possible. So for example, they will tend to give per hour wages as minimum as possible, as might be $2, $1, and on the other hand they will try to sell the product at a high price as possible, because the product themselves has been created by the workers, so they must get full compensation for their labor. But it doesn't happen in the capitalist. But in capitalist system, what happened, that the product it then get sell at a more high price in a market economy, and in that way it leads to a derivation of the value the profit, which you call the surplus value. Then, according to Marx, the constant tendency of capital is to force the cost of labor back towards zero. What is actually the cost of labor? The cost of labor is the minimum wages which received by the labor. The worker, they perform their labor as much as possible, and they do not get full compensation for their labor which they perform under the capitalist system. So it means that the capitalists always try to reduce the cost of labor, where even they can reduce the cost towards zero. It means that it might be possible, and under some certain circumstances they do not even pay them for days. So this is called exploitation. Now, what does it mean by the surplus value? Term which has been most frequently used in a Marx philosophy, that is the surplus value. And what does it mean? That the difference between the value of product when it is sold and the value of the element consumed in the formation of that product, including the worker's labor, means that the value of the product which is sold when it is sold, so it is mostly as high as possible, and the value of elements consumed in the formation of that product, it may be all the raw material, but in most of the cases the capitalists, when they try to determine the exchange value of the product, they do not include the worker's labor. They do not consider the labor which has been performed by the worker, and that's why that most of the labor, they do not get full compensation for the labor which they have performed in order to form the product. This is what we call the exploitation, and the value which get derived, the profit which derive from this difference, this is the surplus value, and mostly goes into the pocket of the capitalist class. And the capitalists do not view the surplus value as a kind of injustice or something else, but they usually view the surplus value as the result of the superior trade. Means that they mostly think of the superior trade as the quality of manipulating the market. They use such kind of flowery words to hide the exploitation and to give more justification for the surplus value. So they mostly think of surplus value as a result of their manipulation, their qualities to manipulate the market, their cleverness, and also their market policies. So they do not they do not label it as a kind of injustice or other. So that's why, according to Marx, it is something, a kind of implicit inequality that exists in the capitalist economy. So labor is the real source of the surplus value. The labor is the real source. The labor is performed by the worker. It is the real source of the surplus value, because how much the labor is performed by the worker, it leads to a generation of profit, because the more effective the product will form, and in that way it will lead to the formation of more and more profit, and all the profit which get generated in the market economy goes into a pocket of the capitalist. So in case of as labor is the real source of the surplus value, but they do not get a full compensation for their labor, and this is what we mostly think of the exploitation under the capitalist system. Then the surplus value is not simply an economic concept, but is a particular social relation and a form of domination. It means it is not only about the economic concept, that there is a kind of exchange value which is set by the capitalist, and it's the amount of the labor performed, but it's also more than the social relation, a form of domination. As we have discussed the base and the superstructure model that is under the capitalist system, we have discussed it in a previous lecture, that there is a means of production that give rise to the relations of production, which determine the social relation, as we have discussed in a base, and on it then it erected the superstructure, which is the normative part of our society. So it means that it is not simply an economic, but it is also the social relation, a form of domination. It is a kind of power which exercised by the capitalist class over the working class. Means that they set the prices, they set the working hours, they set the wages for the worker. These all are the power they have, and they exercise it all over the working class by exploiting them. And the rate of the surplus value is therefore an exact expression for the degree of exploitation of labor power by the capital or of the labor by the capitalist. Means that how much the surplus value has been derived, or we can say that how much the profit has been derived, it is the determination, it is the expression that how much the worker or the labor class has been exploited. Means that more the working class has been exploited, more it will lead to a generation of profit, as the capitalist system has been designed in such a way that the capitalist class must exploit the working class. So that's why it say that the rate of the surplus value is therefore an exact expression for the degree of exploitation or of the labor by the capitalist. Then, according to the Marx, for the conversion of his money into a capital, the owner of money, they must meet in the market with a free labor. Means that in order to convert the money into a capital, capital is also money, but capital is a type of money that we use to generate more and more money. Means that the money which do not get spent, but it is that invested to form to generate more and more money. This is the capital. So in case of those who own the money, means that the capitalist class, if they want to convert it into a capital, what they have to do is that they need free labor. And what does he mean by free labor? That free in a double sense, that as a free man he can dispose of his labor power as his own commodity. Free man means that he can dispose of his labor power as his own commodity, means that he's not a slave, he's not a serf, he can perform his labor and also he can sell his labor as a commodity. Means that there is no restriction, as he's not a slave, he's not a serf, he's not a peasant, but he's a free man under the capitalist system. And that on the other hand, that he has no other commodity for sale, means that he has no kind of ownership, like he do not own the means of production nor the factories, he do not own the techniques or also the other machinery. So he will possess nothing except their labor which they have to perform and must sell. So it is short of everything necessary for the realization of his labor power, and this is all what they must in order to realize in order to realize their potential. And what are their potential? Their labor power. So in order to sell their labor power, what are the two things necessary? That they must be free to sell their labor, and they must have no other commodity in position, so that they will then sell their labor, and in that way it will lead to a full realization of their labor power. So it means that it is not only the requirement of the laborer but also the requirement of the capitalist, that if there is no free labor, means that, for example, if the labor class has some kind of ownership, so of course it will not compel them to sell their labor at the prices which is set by the capitalist. So it can cause trouble for the capitalist class. So it means that there are these two conditions which is necessary for the capitalist class and also for the working class to maintain their status quo under the capitalism. So this was all about the theory of exploitation and the theory of surplus value of the Karl Marx philosophy. So this was the end of our lecture. If you have any question, you can ask in a comment section below. So like, share and subscribe our channel for latest lectures. Thank you.